What if the little girl sitting next to you on a plane somehow knew the name of your dead daughter? What if she whispered things only your child could have known, private memories, pet names, and secrets never shared beyond your family? And what if, despite every logical explanation, your heart told you she wasn't a stranger at all? Ethan Cole, a grieving millionaire, boarded a transatlantic flight trying to outrun his pain. He never expected to meet Lily, a quiet, 8-year-old girl flying alone, with a stuffed elephant in her lap and a memory that didn't belong to her. Was it trauma, coincidence, or something far more extraordinary? As Ethan searches for the truth behind this mysterious child, he's forced to confront not only his past, but a choice that could change both of their lives forever. Is it possible to get a second chance at love after death? Stay with us. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Now, let's begin the journey. The seatbelt sign chimed softly overhead as Ethan Cole stepped into the first-class cabin of Flight 742 bound for London. The plane smelled faintly of disinfectant and old leather familiar scents that reminded him of every business trip he'd ever taken. But this trip wasn't for business. This one was to get away from everything that still hurt too much to face. He handed his boarding pass to the attendant, who greeted him with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Cole. You're in 2A. He nodded, offered a quiet thank you, and made his way to the window seat. The cabin was mostly empty, just a few other early boarders arranging their things, checking their phones, or ordering sparkling water they wouldn't drink. Ethan settled into the plush seat, placing his briefcase beneath the footrest with practiced motion. He didn't plan to open it. There was nothing in there that could help him now. He leaned his head back and stared out at the tarmac. Rain tapped rhythmically against the window, a soft percussion that matched the heaviness in his chest. Outside, airport staff moved like shadows beneath the wing lights. Inside, it was quiet, too quiet. He hated silence now. Ever since that day, the day his daughter, Emery, died, the headlines had called it a freak accident, a car, a speeding driver, a quiet street, a child walking home from ballet class. All that potential gone in an instant. No time to say goodbye. No time to hold her one last time. Ethan had always been good at building things, companies, strategies, futures, but in the months since the accident, all he could build were walls around his mind, around his heart, around every memory of Emery that threatened to break through. He glanced at the empty seat beside him and felt relieved. He didn't want to make small talk, didn't want to explain, didn't want to care. Then he heard it. Small feet, pattering down the aisle. A flight attendant following closely behind. "This way, sweetheart. Right up here." Ethan turned, expecting a parent or a nanny to be close behind, but no one came. Just a girl, maybe 8 years old, thin frame, pale yellow hoodie, messy ponytail, clutching a red backpack and a stuffed elephant that had clearly seen better days. She looked up at the attendant, then at Ethan, her eyes wide, steady, and oddly familiar. The attendant smiled at Ethan awkwardly. "Looks like she's your seatmate." Ethan blinked. "I wasn't aware there would be a child seated here." "She's an unaccompanied minor," the attendant said quickly. "Parents arranged everything. She's very well behaved." She turned to the girl. "Go ahead and sit down. Lily." The girl nodded and slid into the seat beside Ethan without a word. She hugged her elephant tautly and stared out the window, mirroring his earlier posture almost exactly. Ethan didn't speak. Neither did she. After a moment, she turned to him, her voice quiet. "You smell like pine trees and rain." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me," she shrugged. "It's not a bad smell, just it reminds me of someone." He gave a tight, polite smile and turned back to the window. The seatbelt sign blinked on again. The captain welcomed them aboard with a flat voice, listing the route and estimated flight time, 6 hours, 47 minutes. It already felt like a lifetime. Lily pulled out a small sketch pad from her backpack. The pages were wrinkled, the corners soft from wear. She began drawing quietly, the only sound between them now the soft rasp of her pencil. Ethan glanced at the page. She was sketching trees, tall, spindly pines like the ones that lined the edge of the lake near his cabin in Oregon. He swallowed hard. She looked up suddenly, catching his gaze. "Do you go there when you're sad?" she asked. His mouth went dry. "What, the trees?" she said simply. "I dream about them sometimes, the way the wind sounds through the branches. And that little wooden dock." Ethan froze. He hadn't told anyone about the dock, not even the journalists who had begged for an interview. The cabin had been a secret refuge for him and Emery, a place only they had known. He stared at Lily. She looked back at him with a kind of calm that was almost unnatural for a child. Not smug, not knowing, just peaceful. And somehow, it made everything inside him twist. He turned away again, heart thudding. This flight was going to be longer than he thought. The plane had been in the air for just under an hour when the first bump hit. Ethan barely noticed it at first, a slight jolt, a subtle sway. He glanced up from the in-flight map on the screen in front of him. The seatbelt sign flickered back on. Across the aisle, someone muttered nervously. A glass clinked. Then another jolt sharper this time. Ethan gripped the armrest as the aircraft lurched sideways. A few gasps rose from the cabin. Overhead, compartments rattled, and a drink cart up front made a sharp metallic snap as it locked into place. He took a deep breath. He'd flown hundreds of times. This was normal. Just turbulence. Still. His fingers curled tighter around the leather grip. Beside him, Lily didn't move. She sat perfectly still, sketch pad in her lap, pencil resting between her fingers. Her stuffed elephant, now buckled in beside her, seemed to smile serenely through the shakes. "You're not scared?" Ethan asked before he could stop himself. She shrugged. "Not really." He tried to smile, but it came out stiff. "Most kids would be." She glanced at him. "I used to be, but then I realized, if something bad's going to happen, being scared doesn't stop it. So why waste the time that answer so calm? So adult, knocked the wind out of him more than the turbulence did." The cabin jolted again, and the lights flickered briefly. A woman a few rows back cried out. A baby began to wail. The captain's voice crackled through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seat belts fastened. We're experiencing a patch of rough air, but it should clear in the next 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Ethan stared at the seat in front of him, forcing his breathing to stay even. 15 minutes used to be the time it took for Emery's ballet class to wrap up. 15 minutes from when the car hit her to when the paramedics told him she was already gone. He clenched his jaw. Next to him, Lily reached over and touched his arm. Just a light tap. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, unsure why it felt like a lie. She looked at him carefully, not like a child examining an adult, but like a person studying another person, a presence older than her years. "You miss her?" Lily said softly. Ethan froze. "Who?" "The girl with the sunflower dress," she said. She smiled a lot, but only when she looked at you. Ethan's stomach dropped. That dress, bright yellow, little sunflowers printed across the fabric, had been Emery's favorite. She'd worn it every weekend that summer. He hadn't spoken of that dress to anyone, not even Rebecca, not even in his grief counseling sessions. His voice caught. He tried again. "What did you say?" Lily's gaze was steady. "She used to dance in the hallway with the lights off." "Right." He stared at her, heart racing, lungs suddenly tight. His daughter had done exactly that. Every Sunday night, she'd twirl in the hallway outside his home office, her little feet pattering on the hardwood while she hummed her own made-up melodies. He felt like he was falling. "This isn't funny," he said, his voice harder than he meant it to be. "I'm not trying to be funny." Lily's expression didn't change. She wasn't teasing. She wasn't confused. She was serious, sincere. "Sometimes I see things in my dreams," she said quietly. "Not like stories, more like places, moments." Ethan stared at her, and sometimes, she continued, "I wake up and remember something that doesn't belong to me, but it feels real. It feels like home." The plane jolted again, but Ethan hardly noticed. This child, this stranger, was peeling back memories he'd wrapped in iron and buried deep. She was describing details she should not know, and yet she didn't seem scared of the knowledge. She seemed like she'd carried it for a long time. The lights above flickered once more and then stabilized. The cabin steadied. The turbulence faded, as suddenly as it had come. Ethan leaned back, dizzy with thoughts that didn't make sense. He closed his eyes. "Just for a moment." Lily's voice broke the silence. "She called you Papa Bear. That was your nickname." His eyes flew open. That was true. That was real. That was between him and Emery only. It was never posted online, never spoken outside their home. He turned to face Lily, his voice raw now. "Who are you?" Lily tilted her head. "I don't know," she said softly, "but I think I'm supposed to find out." The seatback screen blinked to life with the soft chime of the entertainment system. Rows of icons lit up movies, music, documentaries, distractions designed to make 35,000 feet feel closer to the ground. Ethan scrolled absent-mindedly through the options, not really seeing any of them. Beside him, Lily had curled her legs under her sketch pad set aside. She was chewing absently on the ear of her stuffed elephant, watching Ethan with quiet interest. "Do you ever watch the one about the dancing robot?" she asked. He blinked. "Excuse me, the cartoon," she clarified, pointing at the screen. "With the robot that wants to be a ballerina." Ethan gave a short laugh, not because it was funny, but because the mention felt like a ghost reaching through the seat. Emery had loved that movie. She'd made him watch it, what, a dozen times more. She'd even made him try the dance moves. He could still remember her spinning on tiptoe in front of the couch, arms in the air, her giggles bouncing off the walls. She'd worn those sparkly socks that slipped on the hardwood and always made her fall, but she never cried. She always got back up. He hadn't thought about that in months. Without thinking, he selected the film. The animated opening began cheerful music, bright colors, and a robotic character twirling in a tutu. It was also painfully familiar. Lily clapped her hands softly in delight, leaning closer to the screen. I love this part. She began mouthing the words to the theme song, almost in sync with the characters. Not just humming, not guessing. Word for word. Ethan turned his head slowly, watching her more than the film. She laughed at the same places Emery used to laugh, her hand gestures. The way she leaned forward during the sad scenes, they were Emery's habits. Down to the exact way she rested her chin in her palms. He could feel it happening again. The unraveling. The part of himself he'd locked away behind logic and grief was breaking open again. About halfway through the movie, the robot visits a dance studio, and the teacher gives her a yellow ribbon to tie around her mechanical wrist. Lily whispered, "That's the same ribbon, isn't it?" Ethan looked at her. "Same as what the one your daughter wore on her birthday," she said, eyes still fixed on the screen. "In her hair. You tied it for her." His breath caught in his throat. Yellow satin. Emery had picked it out herself. He still had it in a box in the back of his closet. He hadn't seen it in public photos. Hadn't spoken of it to anyone. But Lily knew. She turned toward him slowly, her voice so soft it barely rose above the movie's swelling soundtrack. "I remember crying because the bow was too tight. But you fixed it." The air between them felt thinner now, not just from altitude, from something else, something unspoken. Ethan looked down at his hands that had tied that ribbon, buttoned those tiny ballet shoes, and now they were clenched in his lap, knuckles pale. "This is impossible," he whispered, not meaning to speak aloud. "I think," Lily said gently, "that sometimes impossible just means nobody's understood it yet." He turned to her, wanting to ask a dozen questions all at once. "How do you know this? Who told you? What are you?" But what he said instead was, "Do you remember her name?" Lily frowned. "Who's my daughter?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she whispered, "Emery." Ethan closed his eyes. He hadn't said that name out loud in weeks, maybe months. There were times when even hearing it in his mind hurt too much, like touching a bruise that never healed. But from Lily's mouth, it didn't hurt. It felt like breathing again after being underwater. When he opened his eyes, Lily was still watching him. Not with pride, not with cleverness, but with something almost tender. "I think I know her," she said softly, "but not like in a book. More like in my bones." The movie continued playing, colorful scenes flashing unnoticed. Outside the window, the sky was dark now, scattered with stars. Ethan leaned back, exhaling slowly. He didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't believe in miracles. He believed in data, evidence, probability. But none of those things could explain how this girl beside him, this quiet child with wide eyes and an old soul, seemed to carry pieces of his daughter in her voice, in her laughter, in her very presence. It made no sense, and yet he didn't want the flight to end. Not yet. A soft chime signaled the start of meal service, followed by the low rumble of the cart rolling down the aisle. Ethan sat still, the empty credits of the movie flickering on his screen. He hadn't said a word since it ended. Neither had Lily, but the silence between them didn't feel awkward anymore. It felt full. "Mr. Cole." The flight attendant approached with a practiced smile. "Would you like the grilled chicken or the pasta primavera?" "Just water, please," he said quietly. She nodded and turned to Lily. "And for you, sweetheart." Lily looked up. "Do you have peanut butter and banana on white bread?" "No crust." The attendant blinked, caught off guard. "I don't think we have that." "I could check the kids' snack options. Maybe a turkey sandwich." Lily looked down, disappointed but unsurprised. Ethan's throat went tight. That was Emery's favorite. Always the same. White bread, no crust, peanut butter on one side, banana slices laid out like little coins. He used to make it for her every Tuesday after school. Lily didn't look at him. She just stared at her tray as if she already knew what he was thinking. After the attendant moved on, Ethan turned to her, voice low. "Who told you about that sandwich?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she picked at the corner of her napkin, folding it into a triangle. "It's just something I've always liked," she murmured. "Since before I can remember." She glanced up. "Is that bad?" "No," Ethan said, shaking his head. "It's just odd." She smiled faintly. "I get that a lot." The attendant returned with a packaged sandwich and a small juice box. Lily accepted it politely, but she didn't touch it. Ethan watched her for a long moment. Then, quietly, "Did you have a favorite place growing up?" Lily looked confused. "What do you mean? A place you felt safe," he clarified, "where you could just be." She was quiet for a moment. "And there was this spot," she said, "in my dreams, a room with sky-blue walls and tiny silver stars on the ceiling. They glowed when the lights went off." Ethan's chest constricted. Charlotte's old room had been painted sky blue. They'd decorated it together. The ceiling stars had been a birthday project. Emery had insisted they match the night sky from the cabin. She'd even made him look up constellation maps. 37 stars, Ethan whispered before he realized he'd said it. Lily turned sharply. "Yes," she said. "Exactly. That's how many." He looked at her, his heart thudding in his ears. He wanted to ask so many things, but the words came out wrong. "Where did you grow up?" "Lily?" She shrugged. "A few places. I was with the Fosters for a while. Then someone named Mrs. Dacey, but that house wasn't good." Ethan leaned in slightly. "What do you mean? They didn't talk to me much. Forgot me a lot. Sometimes I didn't get dinner, but it's okay," she said quickly, as if afraid he'd feel sorry for her. "I learned how to make toast." Ethan swallowed hard. No child should have to learn survival like that, let alone one who sat beside him, calm and kind, with eyes that seemed older than the sky outside. "Do you know who your parents are?" he asked gently. Lily hesitated. "They told me my mom left. They never said much about my dad." Ethan looked down at his hands again. Those hands had held Emery the day she was born, had picked her up after every fall, had closed her eyes the night she left, and now they were shaking. Lily reached over and placed her small hand over his. Warm, steady. "I think," she said softly, "you're supposed to help me find something." He looked at her. "Find what I don't know yet," she whispered, "but I think it's something we both lost." Ethan stared at her for a long time. He didn't believe in fate. He didn't believe in magic or angels or second chances. But in that moment, with this strange child beside him, one who ordered his daughter's favorite sandwich, who remembered rooms she'd never been inside, who looked at him like he mattered, he believed in something. Not everything had to make sense to be true. The cabin lights had dimmed to a soft amber glow. Most passengers were asleep or pretending to be. A hush had settled over the plane, broken only by the occasional clink of cutlery or the faint hum of the engines. Ethan stared at the ceiling. His seat reclined halfway. He hadn't even tried to sleep. His mind was too loud. Across the aisle, a businessman snored softly. A couple, a few rows up, had cocooned themselves in matching eye masks and travel pillows. And beside him, Lily was still awake. She sat curled under a navy blue airline blanket, her stuffed elephant tucked beneath her chin like a guardian. She wasn't sketching, wasn't talking, just thinking. "I miss her," Ethan said quietly, surprising even himself. Lily turned her head slightly. "Your daughter." He nodded. "Emery." Saying the name aloud again still felt like crossing a wire, dangerous, trembling, charged. She would have been 10 last month. He added. Lily didn't speak right away. She waited, gave him room. She liked stargazing. He continued. "We had this telescope on the back deck. Cheap, plastic thing, barely worked, but she didn't care. She'd pretend she was naming new planets." A small smile tugged at his lips, faded quickly. "I didn't make it to the ballet recital," he said. "Work had run late. I told her I'd make the next one. She said it was okay." He paused, swallowed. It wasn't okay. Lily's voice was barely audible. "She forgave you." Ethan looked at her. "You don't know that." She met his gaze. "Yes, I do." He studied her, this child, this stranger who somehow felt like the only person in the world who understood what he carried. "Do you ever think about your real parents?" he asked gently. Lily nodded. "Do you remember them?" She hesitated. "Not clearly." She said, "Just pieces, feelings, like remembering a smell without the memory attached, or dreaming about a house you've never been in, but it still feels like home." Ethan exhaled slowly. There was something so honest about the way she spoke, so quietly certain. "I used to have a dream," she whispered, over and over. "What kind of dream? I was standing on a dock," she said. "There were pine trees all around, and the water was still. There was a man kneeling beside me, tying my shoe. I couldn't see his face, but I remember his voice." "What did he say?" She looked up at him. He said, "You're safe now, little bird." Ethan's chest tightened. That nickname, Little Bird, he'd whispered it once, just once, to Emery when she was sick with the flu and curled against his chest like something fragile. She'd laughed and said, "I'm not a bird, Daddy." And he'd said, "You are to me, my brave little bird." No one else had ever heard it, not even Rebecca. "Why are you telling me this?" Ethan asked, voice shaken. "Because I think you're supposed to remember," Lily said softly. She shifted under her blanket and hugged her elephant tighter. "I don't know who I am. Mr. Cole, not really, but when I sit next to you, it feels like I don't have to try so hard to be someone else." Ethan didn't know what to say. He looked down at his hands again, hands that had built software and satellites and entire empires, but right now, all they wanted was to hold something real. "I haven't prayed since the night she died," he said quietly. "I stopped believing there was anyone listening." Lily was quiet a moment. Maybe she was. She said, just in a different way. He turned to her, and for the first time in a long time, his eyes filled with tears. They didn't fall, but they were there, visible, raw, real. Lily reached over slowly, as if asking permission with her silence, and placed her hand gently over his, the smallest hand he'd ever felt that held the most weight. "You don't have to be alone in this," she whispered. Outside, The stars stretched endlessly across the Atlantic sky, mirrored by the tiny glow-in-the-dark ones still shining in Ethan's memory. Somewhere in the quiet between grief and healing, something had shifted, and neither of them could quite explain it. But both of them felt it. Somewhere over the North Atlantic, halfway between where they'd come from and where they were going, Ethan woke to the sound of a child's voice. Not loud, just clear. "I found the boat," Lily whispered. Ethan stirred, blinking through the haze of sleep. The cabin was dark, but the blue glow of safety lights outlined Lily's small figure sitting cross-legged in her seat. "You were dreaming?" he asked, voice hoarse. She nodded slowly. The lake again, same as always, but this time the boat wasn't empty. He sat up straighter. Who was in it? She looked down at her elephant before answering. "Me," she said, and Ethan's breath caught. The girl, Lily, nodded. "She looks like me. Same eyes, same hair, but her smile is different. She smiles like she already knows something." Ethan couldn't speak. Lily continued softly. "She told me her name. Finally." She looked at him, then steady, without hesitation. "She said her name is Emery." Ethan's throat tightened. Lily leaned closer, and she told me something else. She hesitated, like she wasn't sure she should say it out loud. Ethan gently prompted, "What did she say?" She said, "Tell him it wasn't his fault. Tell him I always knew he loved me, even when he was late." Ethan's heart fractured right there, silently. He turned away, pressing a hand to his face, as if the motion could hold everything inside. Lily didn't press. She just waited, letting the silence breathe. After a long pause, Ethan spoke. "I never told anyone that," he said softly. "Not even her mother. I was late to her recital. I missed the last time she ever danced." Lily didn't respond with words. Instead, she reached into her backpack and pulled something out. A small, folded envelope, aged at the corners, sealed with a sticker shaped like a star. "I found this tucked in the side of Mr. Elephant weeks ago," she said. "I didn't know where it came from. It just felt like it mattered." Ethan took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single photograph, blurry, old, but unmistakable. It was a picture of him and Emery at the cabin. He was crouched beside her at the lake's edge, tying her shoe. The yellow ribbon was in her hair, and something else, scribbled in child's handwriting on the back of the photo. "To Papa Bear, so you won't forget our secret place. I'll always find you there." Ethan's world tipped sideways. He stared at the message, the curve of the letters, the uneven spelling. He remembered it. That was Emery's note. He'd thought he'd lost it when they moved. But how, in God's name, did Lily have it? He looked up at her, his voice barely a whisper. "Lily, where did you really come from?" Her eyes shimmered with something undefinable. Not fear, not confusion, something like knowing. "I don't remember the beginning," she said softly. "Only the echoes. What echoes, feelings, places, names I shouldn't know." She touched her temple gently. "It's like I've been walking in someone else's memories, and now I think some of them are mine." Ethan looked down at the photo again, his heart pounding. This was no coincidence. It couldn't be. He had spent months telling himself grief made him see things that weren't there, that the weight in his chest was sorrow, not unfinished business. But now, sitting next to this child who carried pieces of his daughter's soul like scattered stars stitched into her memory, he began to wonder, Was this a miracle or something else entirely? The voice over the intercom broke the hush of the cabin like a thread snapping. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to a mechanical indicator warning, we'll be making an unscheduled landing at Keflavik International Airport in Iceland. This is purely precautionary. We expect a smooth descent and will be on the ground within 40 minutes. A ripple moved through the passengers' hushed tones, shifting bodies, a few raised eyebrows, but no panic, just discomfort and confusion. Ethan sat still, the photo still clutched in his lap, the envelope pressed between his palms like a prayer. Lily looked calm, not surprised, just ready. I think we're supposed to stop here, she said softly. Ethan turned to her. Why? She hesitated. Because something needs to be found before we keep going. He wasn't sure what unsettled him more, her words, or the certainty in her voice. 30 minutes later, the plane touched down gently on a rain-slicked runway in Iceland, its engines humming to a low idle as it taxied toward the terminal. Passengers muttered about delays and rebookings, irritated but resigned. But Ethan wasn't thinking about missed meetings or hotel vouchers. He was thinking about a name, a memory, and a coincidence that didn't feel like one. As soon as they were cleared to deplane, Ethan asked to speak with the flight services desk. Lily stayed beside him, quiet, observant, gripping her elephant by the ear. In the lounge, while passengers stretched and checked their phones, Ethan called his executive assistant back in New York. "Claire," he said as soon as she answered, "I need a favor, urgent. I need you to find everything you can on a girl named Lily Harper, approximate age 8. Check adoption records, school enrollment, anything. Claire, ever efficient, didn't ask questions. Do you have a birthplace?" "No," he said, "just start with New Jersey, then broaden from there." A pause. "You okay?" Ethan, he looked at Lily, who was now drawing quietly again this time. A picture of a house by a lake, complete with pine trees and stars. "No," he said honestly, "but I'm getting closer." While Claire worked, Ethan opened his laptop and accessed a cloud folder he hadn't touched in over a year. It was titled simply E. Inside were hundreds of photos, videos, voice notes, Emery's laugh, her jokes, her dances in the hallway, the yellow ribbon in her hair. He clicked on a video grainy footage of her birthday at the cabin. In it, she runs across the dock, screaming with laughter, arms open wide, and there in the background a faint image of the very same house Lily had just drawn. He felt the air go out of his lungs. This couldn't be real, and yet it was. Claire called back 20 minutes later. "I found something strange," she said. Ethan leaned in. "Go on." "There's a Lily Harper, born in Trenton, listed as abandoned at a hospital in 2015. No birth certificate, no parents ever located. She was placed in foster care, but the adoption record from 2 years ago doesn't check out." "What do you mean, it's paper only?" Claire said. "No digital match. The couple who supposedly adopted her don't exist in any state records. It's as if she was placed but off the books." Ethan's pulse quickened. "She's in the system," Claire continued, "but everything around her looks tampered with. Someone didn't want her background traced." Ethan stared across the lounge at Lily. She was humming softly to herself now, the same tune from the movie, the same one Emery used to hum when she was nervous. "I need you to go deeper," he said. "Find out who handled the placement, who signed off on it, and Claire, Yes, keep this between us, please." When he hung up, he sat back, his thoughts crashing against each other like waves in a storm. Someone had hidden this child, and yet, here she was, sitting in an airport lounge beside him, drawing memories she couldn't possibly have lived. Ethan had always believed in logic, in data, in answers, but nothing about Lily fit into a spreadsheet. And the more he searched for a rational explanation, the more he began to wonder if he was looking in the wrong direction entirely. 2 days later, Ethan stood in front of a small, weathered building on the edge of Trenton, New Jersey, St. Margaret's Home for Children. The rain had followed him from Reykjavik, soaking the streets and lending everything a tired, gray silence. Even the trees looked like they didn't want to speak. He hesitated before knocking, a man with every resource at his fingertips, now brought here by a child with no records and too many memories. The door opened with a creak. A woman in her 60s stood in the entryway, her cardigan wrapped tightly around her, eyes tired but kind. "May I help you?" she asked. "My name is Ethan Cole." He said, "I'm looking for information about a girl named Lily Harper. She was here about 6 years ago." The woman froze, then, slowly, she stepped aside. "Come in." The entryway smelled of lemon cleaner and something older like dust in the bones of the building. Faint laughter echoed from a hallway down the left, where children's shoes sat lined up neatly against the wall. "I'm Sister Naomi," the woman said, gesturing toward a small office. "Please, inside." Ethan sat across from her at a cluttered desk. File boxes lined the walls, each one labeled in faded marker. "She arrived on our doorstep," Naomi said, "late one night in February. No name, no note, just a baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. No ID band, no records." Ethan frowned. "But you gave her a name." Naomi nodded. "We had to call her something. One of the nurses liked the name Lily. Harper came from a book that happened to be on my desk. And after that, she stayed here until she was almost 3. Sweet child, quiet, observant. She used to sit by the window for hours, watching the trees." Ethan felt his chest tighten. Emery had done the same, sat still for long periods, as if she was waiting for something to return. "Who adopted her?" he asked. Naomi hesitated. "That's the thing," she said, voice low. "We were told she was being placed through a private agency. A man came, very official looking, documents in order, court-signed paperwork. But something felt off." She admitted. "No agency name, no follow-up visits. The number he left didn't work. When we tried to report it, we were told the case had been sealed." Ethan leaned forward. "By who the judge's signature was real," Naomi said, opening a file drawer. "But I later learned he'd retired 3 years earlier." She handed Ethan a photocopy. He stared at the familiar name. Judge F. Keating, a man whose signature had been involved in several controversial closed adoptions over the past decade. "Why didn't you go public?" he asked. Naomi's smile was tired. "We're a small facility. We care for 20 children with barely enough staff to change all the diapers. We tried. No one listened." Ethan studied the photocopy again. The date on the form was just 1 week after Emery's death. Coincidence? Or something far more deliberate? Naomi placed a small folder on the desk. "This is all we have left on Lily," she said. "Most of the digital files are gone, but she used to draw a lot. We kept one." Inside was a faded crayon drawing 2 girls holding hands under a night sky. One had a ribbon in her hair, the other held an elephant. A single word was written in shaky letters at the bottom. Same. Ethan stared at the picture. It wasn't just art, it was memory, and maybe a warning. How could a child so young remember so much? He asked aloud. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. Maybe she didn't forget what she wasn't supposed to. As he left the building, the rain had slowed to a mist. Ethan stood on the steps, staring at the street, his thoughts racing. This wasn't just a strange case of coincidence or trauma-induced memory. Someone had erased Lily's past, disappeared it, and someone else had made sure she found her way back. The question was why it took 3 days, 4 different favors, and a discreet meeting with a private investigator Ethan had once used to vet board members during a corporate merger. But the answers came, and they weren't what he expected. Lily Harper hadn't just slipped through the system. She'd been taken from it, removed by design. A man named Dr. Elias Brandt had signed off on the adoption recommendation through a neurodevelopmental research program registered under a shell nonprofit. The paperwork had been routed through a now-defunct medical foundation operating in Boston. Brandt wasn't an adoption agent. He was a neuroscientist, one who had, 10 years ago, been quietly stripped of his university tenure after allegations surfaced that he had conducted unauthorized experimental memory treatments on patients with dementia and PTSD. No charges had ever stuck. No victims had ever spoken publicly. The program vanished, until now. Ethan stood outside the address tied to Brandt's name, a brownstone office tucked in a quiet street in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The sign on the glass door read, "The Seraph Project, Consciousness and Continuity Research." He buzzed the intercom. The voice that responded was cautious, older, controlled. "Yes, I'm here to talk about Lily Harper." A long silence followed. Then, a click. The door unlocked. The waiting room was small and clinical, more lab than office. Framed credentials lined the walls. Ethan scanned the names Harvard, MIT, Johns Hopkins, all issued before 2014. He was led to a room with white walls and a single desk. Behind it sat a man in his early 60s, neat beard, thin spectacles, a voice like sandpaper on velvet. "Dr. Elias Brandt?" "Mr. Cole," he said without getting up. "You've been busy. So have you," Ethan replied coldly. Brandt folded his hands. "What do you want?" Ethan tossed the photocopy of Lily's fake adoption file onto the desk. "I want to know why a neuroscientist faked an adoption and gave a child a name that never existed." Brandt didn't flinch. "She existed," he said calmly. "She just didn't belong to one world alone." Ethan stepped forward, furious. "Stop talking like a philosopher. This is a child, a living, breathing little girl. What did you do to her?" Brandt looked up at him with something between pity and pride. "I saved her." Ethan froze. From what oblivion? Brandt said. Or more precisely, from being forgotten. He stood and walked slowly to a cabinet, pulling out a thick file and placing it between them. "After your daughter's accident," he said, "her brain was scanned post-mortem for neurotrauma. Your wife consented. She signed the papers as part of the organ donation process." Ethan's heart stopped. That wasn't for this. Brandt's gaze was cool. No, it wasn't. But the scan showed something rare, exceptional memory pattern density, especially in regions connected to sensory memory, emotion, and language. He flipped to a chart. We mapped them. Every cluster, every spark. Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. "What are you saying?" "We found a way," Brant said, to store fragments, pieces of her, and we transferred them not into a computer, but into another mind. No. Ethan breathed into a child whose own early memory centers were underdeveloped, a perfect template. Ethan stared at him, horrified. You implanted my daughter's memories into another child. No, Brant corrected. Not implanted, integrated. He paused. Voice softer now. She's not your daughter, Mr. Cole, but she's not just Lily either. She is. Both. And something new. Ethan staggered back a step, his mind spinning. This was impossible, unethical, insane, and yet Lily, her drawings, her voice, her knowledge of things only Emery could have known. You had no right. He whispered, you stole a life. Brant didn't argue. He simply said, and yet you found her. Ethan clenched his fists. You played God. Brant looked at him with something close to awe. I watched her wake up inside another child. Do you understand what that means? Yes, Ethan said, his voice raw. It means you were so obsessed with preserving memory. You forgot what it means to be human. He turned toward the door, trembling with fury. Brant's final words followed him like a shadow. You can hate me if you want. But the child still smiles when she hears your name. Doesn't that tell you something? The hotel room was quiet, too quiet. Ethan sat in the dark. The file from Dr. Brant spread out across the bed like a crime scene. Scanned neural maps, developmental charts, memory node overlays. The science was terrifyingly real, but what haunted him wasn't in the data. It was in Lily's voice, soft and sure, saying, I think I'm supposed to find something we both lost. She was upstairs now, asleep or pretending to be curled beneath a blanket that smelled faintly of vanilla and clean linen. She trusted him completely, and now he knew everything. He rubbed his face with both hands. The weight of the decision pressed on his chest like stone. He could go public, call the press, expose Dr. Brant, force hearings, investigations, lawsuits. He had the power, the money, the reach. But what would happen to Lily, a child with no legal roots, no medical precedent, and no easy category to file her under? Would they dissect her, study her, lock her behind glass under the banner of science? Or worse, rip away the fragile threads of identity she'd managed to stitch together? She didn't ask for this. She didn't choose to carry someone else's memories, or blend them with her own. And yet, somehow, she'd found him, the only man who could understand both what she was and who she was becoming. He stood and moved to the window. Below, the city flickered with life taxis, cafes, glowing signs for a world that kept moving, unaware that a miracle had quietly unfolded in seat 2B on flight 742. He picked up the phone, dialed a number from memory. Claire answered on the second ring. You okay? Boss, I need you to draft a non-disclosure, he said. Seal every trace of our investigation. Delete all digital copies. Claire hesitated. Are you sure? Yes, he said. I'm keeping her safe. That's all that matters now. She didn't argue. He ended the call. A knock sounded at the door. When he opened it, Lily stood there, hair tousled, elephant in hand. I had the dream again, she said. Ethan knelt in front of her, the lake. She nodded. But this time, I wasn't watching from the dock. His heart skipped. Where were you in the boat? She said. And you were there, too. You held my hand. You said we didn't have to go back unless I was ready. A silence fell between them. Then she asked, Do you believe in second chances? He took a breath. I do now. She smiled, not a wide grin, just the quiet, knowing kind that said she understood more than anyone should. Ethan took her hand. Come on, he said. Let's go home. It was nearly dusk when the car turned off the winding road and began its slow climb toward the house. Tall pine trees lined the driveway, their silhouettes stretching like guardians across the gravel path. The lake lay ahead, still and wide, its surface reflecting the sky's golden light. Lily pressed her face to the window. This is it, she whispered. Ethan nodded. Our cabin. We used to come here every summer. She smiled faintly. It feels like I've been here before. They stepped out into the crisp air. The scent of pine needles, damp wood, and lake water wrapped around them like a forgotten song. Inside, the cabin hadn't changed. Same rough-hewn furniture, same worn rug by the fireplace, same creaky step just before the hallway. Everything was exactly as it had been before. Lily wandered through slowly, touching surfaces like she was tracing memories that didn't belong to her, but still felt like hers. She stopped in front of a small shelf lined with framed photographs. One of them showed a younger Ethan kneeling beside Emery on the dock, both of them barefoot, grinning, tangled in a fishing net. That's her, Lily said softly. Ethan joined her. Yes, she looks happy. She was. He paused, watching her face. You know, she would have liked you. Lily tilted her head. I think we already like each other. Later that evening, Ethan lit a fire while Lily made hot cocoa, careful, measured, like she'd done it 100 times. They sat by the hearth in quiet comfort. The lake shimmered outside the window. I don't know what I'm supposed to be, Lily said suddenly. Not just Emery, but not just me, either. Ethan looked over. I don't think you have to be anything but yourself, he said. No one gets to define that for you. She nodded slowly, thoughtful. Do you think I'm real? He smiled. I think you're the most real thing I've ever known. That night. Ethan sat at his desk, pen in hand. He began to write not a business report or legal letter, but something personal, something that might explain what had happened. One day, when Lily was old enough to read it, he wrote about Emery, about loss, about the impossible choice between truth and protection, about how he didn't save Lily, she saved him. And at the bottom of the page, he signed his name with the words, "To my daughter, whoever you are, and whoever you become." Spring arrived slowly at the lake. The ice melted inch by inch, giving way to glassy water. Green buds bloomed along the pine branches, and soft winds stirred the grass growing along the shore. Inside the cabin, life had begun again. Lily's laughter echoed through the wooden rooms like sunlight, not loud, but constant, steady. She had learned to make pancakes. She fed the blue jays on the porch each morning, and sometimes she still drew, but not always the lake, or the stars, or two girls holding hands. Now, she drew things like tomorrow, new places, new faces, a future not remembered, but imagined. Ethan had registered her for school under her real name, Lily Grace Cole. He didn't give her a label, not survivor, not miracle, just his daughter. There were days the past still whispered, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in the hush of a song Emery used to sing. But Lily no longer flinched when it came. She simply listened, like someone reading an old journal, then turned the page. One night, while tucking her in, Ethan knelt by her bed and asked, "Are you happy?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for his hand and said, "I don't think I ever knew what that word meant. Until now." He nodded, throat tight. She pulled the covers up to her chin. "You were right," she whispered. "I didn't have to go back. I was already home." And she closed her eyes. Ethan stepped outside. The stars were bright above the lake. 37 of them he'd counted, same as before. But something was different now. The grief hadn't left him. It never would. But it had changed. It had become something he could live with, shape, carry not like a burden, but like a bridge. Because love didn't disappear when someone left. Sometimes it returned in a form no one expected, not to replace the one lost, but to remind us what it meant to have loved at all. As he stood there in the cool evening air, he whispered a name into the wind, Emery, and for the first time since she died, he didn't feel broken. He felt whole. Some stories don't end with answers. They end with a feeling, a reminder that love is never lost. It simply changes form. Ethan didn't just find a little girl on that flight. He found a piece of what he thought he had lost forever. Not a replacement for his daughter, but a reason to believe in hope again. And Lily. She wasn't just a miracle. She was a mirror showing us how memory, identity, and love can survive beyond logic, beyond systems, even beyond death. But her story also raises a difficult truth. Why do we accept some children and discard others? Why do we label the broken and overlook the beautiful complexity inside them? Every child deserves to be seen, to be safe, to be held, not studied, not hidden, not forgotten. If this story moved you even for a moment, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories that heal, that question, and that connect us in ways we don't always expect. Until next time, hold on to love. It always finds a way back.